Welcome back to another video. I will be showing you all how to build a customizable Hugo navigation bar with Bootstrap 5.2. You will also learn how to set up each of these pages. I have an empty folder created already called Bootstrap Navbar tutorial. So I'm going to create my Hugo site within this empty directory. To do so, I use the command Hugo new site space dot to generate all the files in the current directory. So you can see the files are here. Next, what I want to do is I want to create a new theme. To do that, I will use Hugo new theme, and the name of the theme, I will call it my menu. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the config.toml file to a config.yaml file. And then make sure the content is changed as well. Next, I want to set the theme to be the theme that I just created, which is called my menu. Now, if you run Hugo server-d, you'll notice that the page is not found. And the reason for that is because you have to include something in the index.html file. And in this case, if I type in hello world and save this again, if you do a hard refresh, this right here shows the content. Next, we're going to include Bootstrap in our Hugo theme. Let's just go to Bootstrap website. Bootstrap 5.2 is what I'm using, and scroll down here. And we want to first just copy the head tag, and you want to go to your layouts and head.html file and paste that in there. And next, you want to copy this script and also include this in your HTML file. In this case, I'm going to create a new HTML file called script footer.html and include that script in there. Okay, after you do this, make sure you save and open up your default base of HTML file and make sure that you include the script footer.html file in your base of the HTML file. Now, if you save this and go back to your local host, open up the inspect, and you'll notice that there's nothing in the header. And also there's nothing in the footer as well. It doesn't have our Bootstrap stuff. And the reason for this is because in your index.html file, you have to remember to use your Hugo template language, define man, and make sure whatever content that you're going to create is going to be within this define man block. And as you can see, once I have this, then Hugo is able to render the space of the HTML file, which has the head.html, headers.html, and also the main block, which includes the data that's in our index.html file. So if you go back again, you'll notice that now in our head tag, we have our Bootstrap information. So now we have Bootstrap set up. What we're going to do next is to go to our configuration.yaml file and configure our menu. And before I start using Bootstrap menus, first I'm going to show you guys how to use the Hugo template language to create a basic menu without any styles. So let's first define what our menu is. And we're going to have our main menu, and the names of our main menu is going to be homepage, which is home, and then another name called features, another name called pricing. This one's going to be the custom drop-down menu, and within the custom drop-down menu, we want to be able to have the drop-down list, and we'll call this drop-down 1, and then call this drop-down 2. Now, in order to make sure that this menu entry is the dropdown of this custom dropdown entry, what we have to do is we have to use the parameter called identifier to identify what this custom drop down menu is. So we'll call this identifier to be custom drop down. Now that this has an identifier, we can use the parent parameter to link the child drop-down list to the parent drop-down menu, which in this case is the custom underscore drop-down identifier. So once we have this, hit save. Now, if I didn't make any mistake, then this should have the basic display of a menu. Now we have to go into our headers.html file and actually print those menus out. In your headers.html file, first thing that you will do to print out all the menu entries that we just defined, you will use the range function to loop through the menu we defined. So to access that menu, we will use the .site variable, .site.menus.main, and make sure you have an and tag for this range. And within this range, we want to print out the names of the menus. And in this case, we'll print out as a list. And to access the name, you would use .name with capitalized N. So if you save this and go back to your home page, then you'll notice that your custom drop-down menu entry is here and everything else is here as well. As you can see, the drop-down 1 and drop-down 2 is not here, and that's because we haven't write the logic to do that yet. And also you'll notice that the order of this menu is kind of out of order because I want home to show up in the very front, and then feature, and then pricing, and then custom drop-down will be at the very end, and we'll fix that right now. So let's first print out those drop-down menu first. Within this range, you want to check whether if the menu entry has children, and to do that you will use if has children, and make sure you have the and tag. So if it has children, then we want to print out the drop-down lists, and if it doesn't have children, then we want to print out the normal lists. Okay, so in that case, we'll use an else statement and print out that. So if we just have this right now, and if you go back, then you'll notice that the custom drop-down menu entry is gone. So in that case, what we can do is we'll have the list of the custom drop-down menu, and then within this if statement, we can have another range function to loop through the children, and you would do range.children, and make sure you do a closing and tag. So within here, same thing, you can print out the name of those children, which is the drop-down menu names. Now, if you go back, you'll notice that we have the custom drop-down menu, and then also its children, which is drop-down 1 and drop-down 2. So now we're able to print out all the menu entries that we defined in the configuration YAML file. What we want to do next is we want to reorder how the menu is displayed. So to do that, you want to use the parameter called weight, and the order of the menu is in an ascending order. So I'm going to just set the weights to be an offset of 10. This way the menu item will be in an ascending order. And within the drop-down menu, you can reset the number of weight. So in this case, I will have it to be weight of 10 and 20. So if you refresh that and go back, and you'll see that this is the order that we wanted. Just to demonstrate what this means, so if I change this to be 30, then you'll see the drop-down 1 and 2 spot will be swapped. Try that again. Yeah, there we go. Drop down 2 and drop down 1. Gotta make sure you save. Next, what we're gonna do is set up the page references so that when we click on the menu items, it will redirect us to the appropriate page. And to do that, we will use this parameter called page ref. And in this case, homepage will be represented with a slash. The features page, I would define it as /features. And then pricing /pricing. We're not gonna set a page reference for the custom dropdown since we don't want it to direct us to any page. However, for its dropdown pages, we want it to get redirected to its appropriate page. So in this case, we'll set it to dropdown 1. And this one will be dropdown 2. Now we have the page reference set up. What we want to do next is to create the appropriate markdown files in the content folder. And the reason we do that is because once we created the corresponding markdown files, then all these links will be linked to those markdown files. To demonstrate what this means, if you save this config.yaml file right now and go back to your web page, okay, right now you can't click on them. So what we want to do first is to make sure that this is all clickable. And I forgot to do that at the very beginning. I should have done this at the very beginning. Anyways, we'll have an A tag where the href would be the .url, and then the content of the A tag would be the name. And we'll remove this guy right here, and we'll copy that and just paste it into our lists. Oops. Okay, once we save that, there we go. Now we have links to click on. And if you click on these, you'll notice that we can't really redirect it to anywhere. And that's because we don't have the markdown file set up. And if you check the lists, you'll notice that this is the href, it's no. That's because we don't have the markdown files. Let's do that right now. Let's create all those markdown files. I'm going to kill the server and use the Hugo command to create all the markdown files in the content folder. So you would do Hugo new. In this case, we want to create a features.md. So Hugo new features.md. It created a MD file in the content folder. Next, we want to create the pricing.md and also dropdown1.md and dropdown2.md. Okay, so now we have all these files created. If you run that server again, refresh your page, then you'll notice that now it redirects you to page not found. And if you check the lists in here, you'll see that now the href is populated. And this one is not populated because this is the top level custom dropdown and we didn't have anything in this href. You can see this is dropped down to href. Now in order for this to actually redirect it to a actual page, we have to create the layout files for these markdown files. So each of these markdown files needs a HTML layout file. You can specify a layout parameter in your front matter to define the name of the HTML file. In this case, I mean the dropdown1.md file, and I will name the HTML file for this to be dropdown. So once you have this layout parameter defined, you want to go to your themes, my menu, layouts, and create a new folder in here called page. And within this page folder, you will create a HTML file called dropdown. In this case, dropdown1.html. And I need to correct this layout name here to be dropdown1. Each markdown file has a type, and that's how you determine where to look for its corresponding layout file. And by default, it will look into the page folder within your layouts. If you want to place the HTML file into a different folder, then what you will want to do is you will want to define what that type is. In this case, if I call it dropdown, then what will happen is you will create a new folder under layouts called dropdown and place the dropdown1.html in your dropdowns folder. So now, in this case, if I save this and go back, if I go to dropdown1, still page not found. So what I would do here is go to dropdown1.html and just type in hello. So now this HTML page has some content. If I refresh this again, and you can see in localhost 1313 dropdown1, we have hello. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this type. And once you remove that type, refresh this again. Okay, let me see. Let me just restart that server. Refresh this page. There we go. Page not found. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my dropdown1.html into my page folder and remove this dropdown folder. Let's create another file. called dropdown2.html, and also features.html, and finally pricing.html. And we have to go back to the markdown file to define what their layout name is. And in this case, it would just be dropdown2, and then features.md layout is features.html file. Then finally, for the pricing, the layout will be pricing. Okay, now if we refresh this again, right, give us hello, right, same thing, we need some content in the .html files. I'll change this to this is dropdown1. This is pricing, and this is features. So now, as you can see, this is features, this is pricing, this is dropdown2, and this is dropdown1. Now we have correctly linked all the URLs to the correct menu. Now that we're able to print out the menu from the configuration file, we can integrate Bootstrap navigation bar into this so that we will have a nicer styling. So let's go to the Bootstrap documentation and scroll down to the Navbar. And we'll be using this navbar here where it's got the drop down link. So copy this HTML and go back to your code. Go to your themes menu, layout, partials, and headers.html file. For now, I'm going to remove the simple menu that we just created and just paste in the HTML code that we just copied. If we just save this and go back to the web browser, then we'll notice that we have the navigation bar displayed here. Now we just have to populate the menus using the menu entries in our configuration file. So if you look at the code, this list right here is the menu item without any drop-down list. And this list here is the menu that has drop-down list. For now, we'll work with the one without the drop-down list. To populate the menu items, we will use the range function. So you will just do range.site.menus.man, and then you will just populate the list within this range function. So in this case, you want to replace the name of the menu with the one we defined in the configuration file. To do that, we use the name variable, and also replace the href with the one we defined, which is .url. So now if you just save this and go back, we have our menu populated here: home, features, pricing, and custom dropdown. Okay, before we're going to continue modifying our menu, I'm going to make a small change to the individual pages of these menus so that it will also populate the menu when I click on to this page. So go to page dropdown and include the definition of man. Okay, now if you go back to these pages, as you can see, in each of these pages, the navbar is included as well. So let's go back to our headers.html file. And what we're going to do next is to print out the drop-down menu. But first, let's just remove this list here. We no longer need those hard-coded lists. We'll use the if dot has children statement, and then make sure I'm just gonna do an and right here. So if it has children, then we want to print out the item with children, which is the drop-down list. And else, we want to print out just the regular menu items. So if I just save this and just check the web page, and you'll notice that there is an error. Can evaluate the field has children. There we go. I need a capitalized C instead of lowercase c. Try that again. Here we go. Now you can see it populated the home features pricing, and we still have the hard-coded drop-down link here, but then the custom drop-down is missing, and that's because we don't have anything in this if block. Let's move the drop-down list, the hard-coded drop-down list, into our if block, and from here, instead of printing out drop-down link, the hard-coded drop-down link, we'll print out the name of our drop-down menu. And then, as you can see, within this unordered list is where we print out the drop-down list. So this is where we want to print our drop-down list. So in this case, we will use the range function again to loop through the children. And make sure you do a and. Now we can just copy one of these lists into this range block, and from here we'll print out our URL and also the name of our drop-down menu. Oops. And then remove the hard-coded lists. So save this. Now if you go back here, you'll see that our custom dropdown is here. If you click on it, there's dropdown 2 and dropdown 1. So you'll notice that the text here, it's all black, and however the custom dropdown is gray, right? And then if you actually go back to the bootstrap page, the feature, pricing, and drop-down link are all gray, and only the home page is black. And if you're on the features page, then your features text should be black and everything else should be gray. But that's not happening in our page. And the reason for that is because we have this active class on every single nav item except the drop-down menu. So what we want to do is we want to use an if statement to only have the active class on the menu that we're currently on. So to do that, what you want to do is you want to define a variable name that's very top. And now we'll call this current page, and we'll set this to the global context. Within this a tag, we want to have a if statement. If current page dot is menu current equal to man. Then we want to pass in the global context. So if the current page dot is menu current is equal to man, then we want to show active, and then we want to end here. So in this case, when we're on the page, then the corresponding menu item will be active. Then every other menu item will not have the active class. So if I save this and go back, once I'm on the home page, the text color of the home menu is black and everything else is gray. If I click on the other menus, same thing, page that you're on, it's active. And that's it. That's how you would build a navigation bar with Bootstrap and Hugo. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy this video. Please like, sub, and comment.